Hey everybody, this is Richard and welcome to another episode of Fatal Error. This show began as a research project for me to understand how entrepreneurs and founders think about the climate emergency and figure out ways in which all organizations, not just non-profits, can become climate positive. Today's guest is Tim Frick, CEO of Mightybytes, a digital marketing agency. What makes Mightybytes unique is that they are a certified B Corp and have declared an internal climate emergency. B Corps are companies who balance profit with purpose and hold themselves accountable to that. As a B Corp advocate, Tim believes these kinds of structures are foundational to solving climate problems. Let's hear what he has to say. I'll give you a brief intro of what we're doing. So this is kind of originally started off as a research exercise with talking to entrepreneurs, people in tech and so on about climate change, sustainability, and so on. Mainly to start the conversation. And then I had the idea of actually publishing this stuff in a podcast, video channel kind of form. So this is what we're doing now. I'm not an expert on pretty much anything, but certainly not climate stuff. So it's a sort of like, I'm trying to learn from people. Maybe if I've learned something from somewhere else, we can have a conversation about it. And one of the things I'm super interested in, which is where our currently small audience is interested in as well, is like not so much about the maybe activist side of things or which is the best clean tech thing that is going to save the world kind of thing, but more of a sort of what does the regular entrepreneur do about this, right? And not also individuals and so on, but I'm interested in like as organizations, as corporations, where can we put our effort to be better climate citizens, right? Because there are a lot of people who want to be better, but they don't know how, or at least they don't have time to learn how and so on. So one of the things I really want to hear from you about is the whole B Corp thing, right? Because you are kind of quite into that, and it's kind of alternative ways of doing business. But to backtrack a little bit, maybe we can start off with, tell me a little bit what you are, what you do. So I know that you run a company called Mightybytes, right? But it would be good to hear it from you, what the company is about, your background, just the kind of the potted version, right?
Sure, yeah. So I started Mightybytes, which is a digital agency, meaning that we build websites and tech products and run digital marketing campaigns for clients, mostly who are kind of mission-driven clients. So social enterprises, large nonprofits, other B Corps, that kind of thing. I started the company in 1998. It was my second agency. I had an agency prior to that for a couple of years. So I basically got into being an entrepreneur at the height of the kind of, early internet frenzy. Where everyone was like looking at the internet as the great savior and this crazy thing that's going to revolutionize literally everything. And, it has for better or for worse. But the
first bubble kind of era, right? Petfood.com.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, Mightybytes, opened our doors and shortly after the very first tech bubble burst. So we've definitely seen our share of ups and downs in terms of, just what running a business and that kind of thing. And it was really easy. There was work everywhere in the 90s on the internet. I mean, there was really like, you couldn't, it was just all kinds of projects everywhere with all kinds of big budgets and all that kind of stuff. People had stars in their eyes over everything, which was a heady time to be an entrepreneur. But also, it was easy to make a lot of really bad decisions because a lot of people didn't know what they were doing. It was a whole new kind of paradigm in terms of how business is done and how, what the internet could do for us. There were a lot of really bad ideas floating around there. And, we did a couple projects that I personally weren't aligned with my values. And I felt really dirty and felt really...
What kind of projects? Without mentioning, the details if you don't want to.
Right,
but, what kind of maybe general areas?
Well, I mean, to be frank, one of them was like marketing cigarettes as an active lifestyle brand. So it was like a lot of like action sports and, kind of things that, like you like snowmobiling and kind of stuff where they were, trying to pitch cigarettes as kind of to go along with like extreme sports, which I just found crazy, And that was like one example of a kind of project that came along, and we needed the work. And so I accepted it because we needed the work, but it was really kind of, I got done with it and thought, this is not what I want to be, not what I want to do. So, shortly after launching the company, I started really soul searching on what kind of work we wanted to do and what kind of, projects we wanted to be known for. And the mission driven work was what really inspired me. I've always been inspired by people who are, really committed to out there to make, positive social and environmental change happen. So we pretty actively started going after that kind of work and volunteering our time whenever we could. And essentially, just trying to align ourselves with people who are doing social and environmental impact.
How big is the organization now? How many kind of people?
Oh, we're under 10 people. So we're small.
Sure, it's small, but it's not a
we've been twice that size in the past.
Okay.
No, exactly. Yeah. We've been twice that size in the past, but it really, I found it hindered our ability to be agile and kind of pivot when needed. And in these kind of crazy disruptive times, the ability to change on a dime and shift your approach and kind of base your business model on continuous learning and agility is critical. And I think, you were asking about B Corps and kind of what we as entrepreneurs can do. And I think how we run our organizations is probably our opportunity for the biggest positive impact.
Absolutely. And let's jump right into B Corps, right? So I learned about B Corps fairly recently, in the scheme of things, maybe a couple of years ago, kind of thing. But only really, I'd heard about them, but I only started looking into them literally in the last few months or so, maybe in the last year. And I've only actually ever met via Zoom one person who runs a B Corp. I know there are many, but on a personal level, was actually one of the previous episodes in this podcast, Tom Greenwood. He also runs an agency.
I know Tom well. I actually have a call with his team tomorrow on Thursday.
Okay.
We collaborate on stuff.
That's a small world, yeah. So, so it's kind of interesting that you're both agencies, kind of very similar, kind of businesses, I suppose.
I would say, honestly, of all the companies and agencies in the world, Whole Grain Digital is probably as close to Mightybytes as I've ever seen. And vice versa. I mean, we really are very similar kind of companies.
And just as a caveat, this was not planned. No objection, but at all. But it wasn't like intentional. But so what is why does? So as I understand it, a B Corp is a profit-driven organization, or it's not a not-for-profit, it's not a non-profit thing, but it's a for-profit organization that's balancing profit with purpose of some kind. Yes. And by balancing, it's sort of not just having a mission statement, right? It's backed up by some kind of measurement, audit of that purpose, right? So how would you, what can you fill in my gaps there?
Sure. Absolutely. So, B Corps, there's about 3,500 of us around the world, and they range from one-person consultancies up to large multinational corporations. And the one thing that we all have in common is that we use the power of business to solve social and environmental problems. And that, the certified B Corps are audited every 3 years by a third-party verified standards-based, nonprofit called B Lab. And they have a B impact assessment, which we take. I'm just about to start our 5th recertification as a B Corp. Actually, we just worked on it this weekend a little bit. And so, we go through this audit process every 3 years. And in the meantime, we use their assessment as a tool to kind of guide our social and environmental impact efforts. And that the fact that it's third party verified means that we adhere to the highest levels of accountability, transparency.
Right, because you can do it yourself. You can sort of self-assess as well, right? So what sort of things are they measuring besides, obviously, there's the financial side of it. You do need to have a sound financial kind of foundation. So I assume that part of it is that. But then what are the other things, the other main pillars?
Well, I would say, we as B Corps, we pursue profit just like any other company does. It's what we do with that profit that makes us different. It's how we allocate that profit. And we as a mission-driven organization, a certain part of our business assets and the resources that we have as a business, whether that's, employee time or product or services or financial assets, whatever, those are allocated or earmarked for, social and environmental impact efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And, preferably those are integrated with the business model as well. So it's not like we make profit over here and then we give money to charity over here. You're actually integrating the two of them so that, the product that you make, potentially like serves an underserved market or, helps create some sort of positive impact in the sale of the product or service.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you describe, because I almost, everybody likes it when people kind of use their own words, right? And I almost use exactly what you said with an interview where haven't not published yet, but to be published soon, and where we were talking about this thing of, it feels like a lot of us kind of think about, oh, well, charities do the good stuff and businesses do the rest. And if businesses do good stuff, then, oh, we're becoming a charity, right? And there's this sort of weird, almost
mutually exclusive
split, right? It doesn't have to be like that. But because we've kind of gotten used to that approach, a lot of people don't immediately think of, well, how do you structure a business? So to do that. So you're saying you're pursuing profit, but the point of the profit is different. So what is your mission? What are you investing your profit in?
Sure. So we use the B impact assessment, which is broken into 5 categories. It's, community, what kind of role you play in the community. Governance, like what kind of roles policies and practices you put in place to run the company.
Mm-hmm.
Workers, so anybody who works at the organization, whether that's a contractor or an employee. Environment, so what your environmental impact is. Let's see, community, government, and customers, who you choose to have as customers.
Okay.
So those are the
Which
those
is
are the
what
5
you
kind of
started
pillars.
off with at the beginning. Like, for example, in your case, you probably wouldn't take on another cigarette company or tobacco company as a customer.
Exactly.
Okay. Have you turned down customers? Do you turn down customers on a kind of...
Yeah, we're pretty picky about the kind of work that we do. We give everybody the benefit of the doubt and have a first conversation if that's,
Mm-hmm.
if that's warranted. We have had like fossil fuel companies come to us and we just say no right out, and like you said, if a cigarette company came to us now, we would just kind of be like, have you looked at our website?
Yeah.
Because we're pretty mission forward and pretty purpose forward in our messaging.
Well, and I had a look at your site, and it's clear that you're not just a kind of a hired gun.
Right.
So how long have you been a B Corp? Because you've been in business since the late 90s, you mentioned, right? As Mightybytes.
Yeah.
So how long have you been a B Corp?
I learned about B Corps in 2010, and we became a B Corp in 2011. We were the 9th B Corp in the state of Illinois, which is where Mightybytes is located.
And so how did that happen? Was there, did when you say you learned, was it like an employee who brought it up? Did you have a discussion with the staff as to whether this was a good idea or not? How does this transition happen?
Yeah, so I learned about it on a climate ride. So I do charity bike rides that raise money for environmental nonprofits. And so I was on there, and someone from B Lab was speaking, the organization that certifies B Corps. And they were talking about what B Corps are. And we had been, looking into, right around 2010, 2011, the app craze was going crazy. And so we were trying to figure out what role we played and what we wanted to do. Are we going to start building mobile apps or,
Mm-hmm.
When we were doing brainstorming as a team, we realized that most of our ideas had some sort of civic or social impact component, that it wasn't necessarily just like we're going to sell more stuff using these apps. It was really about like, oh, well, we can create an app to help people understand Chicago history by doing, walking tours. And, there's a bunch of different ideas that really weren't, kind of straight on commerce. And so we thought, well, maybe we realized because of the fact that they weren't, driven solely by profit, that we might be difficult to get funding for some of those. And so we were like, well, maybe we should look at a different kind of model where, nonprofits get grants. And so is there an opportunity for us to do something around that? And,
Mm-hmm.
and we learned about the L3C, which is a low profit company, which is a structure in the United States. And it's a physical, it's a legal structure where as long as you keep your profit margins low, you're eligible for grants from like the government or philanthropists and stuff.
Oh, that's
So we were
interesting.
thinking on this way before we even found out about B Corps already. And then we realized that B Corps were, this kind of layer of like it was a lot of what we were doing already. But we could also maintain, the kind of purpose-driven and profit-driven model alongside one another. And so we decided to try the assessment. And so we went through the certification. As I said, we became B Corp number 9 in Illinois. I think we were like number 430 or something like that of all B Corps at the time.
Yeah.
And then in 2013, the state of Illinois, where the company is located, passed benefit corporation legislation, which allowed us to legally change our structure of our business. So we are a public benefit corporation, which means we pursue a public benefit alongside profit. And we use, you have to claim what your public benefit is. And so we chose a general public benefit using the B impact assessment. As our kind of verification tool. You have to have a verification tool to validate your efforts. And so the B impact assessment serves as that for us.
Okay. Sorry,
to unpack there, I know.
Yeah. There's a lot to kind of process, which is not stuff which I was, I'm not surprised. Like, it's kind of matches up with what I've heard about, but it's interesting to see the journey there. So, the main kind of purpose of my main interest at the minute, at least, is the climate side of things, which the more I've learned about, the more you realize is very intimately tied with everything else. You
Absolutely.
can't, once you can't be like, oh, we'll fix the climate, but ignore diversity or ignore income inequality or something like that.
They're all intertwined.
Right. But theoretically, if you really fix one in a holistic way or attempt to improve one, then you should be affecting the other things positively as well. But purely from a climate perspective or environment perspective, just you personally, Tim, what's your position on from what are you sort of like not a climate denier, presumably, because otherwise you wouldn't have accepted my invitation, I guess. But, on the spectrum of like climate denier, Mr. Trump over here, all the way to like Extinction Rebellion of like the world is ending tomorrow. Where are you and why?
I'm pretty close to Extinction Rebellion. So I'm way over on that end. I've been on the board of a climate organization for 7 years. I was 3 as its president. The Climate Ride that I mentioned earlier, it's been something that's been really an important personal cause for me, and sustainability in general, and environmental conservation, and all the kind of related things that go along with it, as you were saying. That's been really critical and important for me personally, and I use my business as a tool to kind of improve and do whatever I can on that. So I kind of, to get to what you're saying, when we became a B Corp, our eyes were opened up on all kinds of different things that we could do as a company that we weren't really aware of, in terms of worker benefits and community roles and all kinds of stuff. And, on the environmental side too, we looked at the questions that we're asking. We're like, all right, so how can we improve our environmental approach? And at the same time, research was starting to come out that the environmental impact of the internet, which is the thing that we build for a living, was huge and massive, and a source of massive, incredible
I was shocked when I started looking into that, just literally when I started these interviews, this podcast, and I was, I don't know how I missed it.
It's massive.
But it's kind of huge. We're talking bigger than aviation.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. It's a really, really massive thing. And so that was, for us, that seemed the easiest first thing to start.
So what do you do there? Because in a sense, I don't mean to sound depressing about it, but and I'm kind of in a similar situation. I've worked for software companies doing marketing, website design, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
If you think about, the internet and the web and all this stuff being, this huge kind of carbon footprint that is growing, then if
Yep.
you're in the business of designing websites and bringing traffic to them, you're almost like you're working for an oil company, in a sense, right? In one sense. So what do what have you guys been doing, right?
Sure. Yeah, so we completely retooled our entire process to be focused on performance, efficiency, and powered by renewable energy.
Okay.
And so those were really core things for us to figure out. And so the faster a web page downloads, for instance, the less energy it uses.
Mm-hmm.
The faster people find content, the less energy they use when they're doing searches. The easier something is to use, the less energy it uses.
Okay.
All of these are really best practices in web design, but many organizations do not apply to them. And then, of course, probably the biggest thing is, how do you power your websites with renewable energy? Can
Well,
you
that is
find a
one of the
server
big,
that's
yeah.
right? Yeah. And so
How do you find the right hosts?
there's a tool called an organization called the Green Web Foundation.
Yep.
I think it's just the greenwebfoundation.org.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a host. They have one of the only databases on the internet of green hosting providers, and they rank them and validate them and all that kind of stuff. When we were starting to do this back in 2012, shortly after we became a B Corp, we realized that when we started talking about this stuff with our clients, most of them it wasn't resonating with them at all. They didn't understand it. And we realized we had to take a step back and that there was a big educational hurdle there. So
Okay.
making sure that our clients understood the realization of not only is a performance optimized site better for users, but it's also better for the environment too. And so
And
kind of
does
helping
it
them with
cost
that.
more, right? So does it cost more to host your sites or apps on these hosts, right? And how do you sell that if it costs more?
Yeah, I think there's thousands of hosting providers out there, and they range in all kinds of services that they offer and costs that they offer. So unfortunately, the answer to that is it depends. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a bargain basement web hosting provider that powers with renewable energy, most likely they're probably buying unbundled renewable energy credits, which isn't the best situation, but it's better than nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for, what we try to look for is hosting providers that are directly, through their efforts, directly promoting the proliferation of more renewable energy. So that the money that they spend on renewable energy credits goes directly towards making more renewable energy. And so making sure that we
Okay.
understand those, and the Green Web Foundation
And
actually
how do you
categorizes
find out this stuff?
servers.
Because the little bit of research I've tried to do, for example, when you look at like, okay, what are the green credentials of this host?
Right.
It is very hard for somebody who's not into it to actually
Yep.
really work out what they're saying and doing and what it means. And
Yep.
ultimately people can write stuff, and who's verifying, right, that the data center
Right.
is using blah. How do you how do you make sense of all of this?
Yeah. Well, and that's the opportunity there is that the Green Web Foundation is currently the only organization that I know of that does that and does that.
Okay.
And so they do a really great job. They're horribly underfunded. They
Mm-hmm.
need much more money than they have, and they do that research to make sure that to validate that the hosting provider claims are actually can be verified and stuff. And so I think I would love to see more organizations focusing on this. I don't think the drive has been there yet. Slowly but surely, like I said, in 2012, we talked to our clients and nobody really understood what it was. But now you're starting to see Fast Company and Wired and like larger media organizations, the New York Times, are covering this idea of the internet's environmental impact more regularly. So I think that there's more of an awareness around this kind of stuff than there ever used to be, and hopefully that will continue. Because the internet is growing at a rapid fire, in a really fast pace, and so it would be great if all of that growth was powered by renewable energy.
Yes, for sure. Just to take it a step kind of broader, I suppose.
Sure.
If we all pull together and everybody including the hosts and the companies building sites and whatnot, really move towards renewable energy sources for hosting and so on. That would be great, but it's not going to solve the kind of the bigger picture, the climate crisis bigger picture. So because you're involved, and you said yourself, you've put a lot of thought into these matters, and this is maybe partly as you as an entrepreneur, partly as a person who's close to Extinction Rebellion side of things. What's needed? What do we need to do? Because okay, we can change our hosting companies, and part of me is like, is that it? Yeah. That seems like a very small thing.
Yeah, no, it is a very small thing.
What other things do companies need to do, and individuals running the companies?
Well, I think, yes, it would be great if everybody who owned a website took responsibility for how fast and efficient it was, how user-friendly it was, and whether or not it was powered by renewable energy. As a business owner, there's all kinds of things. You can pay your employees a living wage. You can, there's, all kinds of things that will help improve quality of life, as well as improve, specific things towards, the climate crisis. And so, commit to net zero as a company, and try to get to zero waste as a company.
Have you done that, for example? Have you committed to net zero or something close, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, we have. We earlier this year, we could declare, actually in 2019, was it 2019 or early 2020, we declared a climate emergency, and there's a whole toolkit that you can use to do that.
You declared the climate emergency within your organization, kind of thing?
Yeah. And so you basically.
What do you mean? What do you mean? How do you do that? Is it like
you seem very intrigued by this.
Because it's interesting, right? It's
Whole Grain Digital did it as well.
Okay.
And there's a whole toolkit, and it's essentially a communications toolkit. And you're basically saying, you're drawing a line in the sand that this is an emergency, and we need to treat it as such.
Okay.
And so, for us, we made a claim. We let everybody know. We put it on our blog. We started blogging, promoting it out on social media and stuff like that. Our goal is to get to net zero. We're pretty close already, because we power all of our operations with renewable energy. We offset any travel that we do. We try to restrict travel. Obviously, no travel is happening right now during coronavirus. So there's a bunch of things that we can do. Could we be more quantified about it? For sure. I think we have some work to do on the data analysis side. But the reality is, as a small firm, we're doing pretty well.
So I have a lot of questions about this stuff, and I'll try to structure things in the right way. I'll start with net zero, right? Because that's always like a tricky thing, in a sense that there's two ways of getting to net zero, right? There's or two approaches that can happen in parallel. But on the one hand, you can reduce your stuff. So you mentioned, for example, restricting travel, right? And on the other hand, you've got offsetting the stuff that you so if you do need to travel, then you're going to offset that, right? And arguably, the reduction is way better than the offsetting, right? But it's not possible to reduce completely for most people, because otherwise you just cease operations, right? So what do you offset? How do you offset? What are the best offsetting strategies? I feel a bit wary of these companies popping up with like, I'll pay $2 a month and we'll plant a tree on your behalf and you're climate positive or whatever. And I kind of feel like maybe that's a bit too simplistic.
I would definitely agree with this. This should be work, because it is an emergency, and you should put the effort in, and there is I agree with you in that just writing a check to someone is never going to be enough. It's just not going to be the right, you have to really truly think through all of your operations and where the potential scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions are. And for us as a small company that's less than 10 people, we do have an office space, so we can, manage that and stuff like that. We do have, some people work from home. We have some contractors. And so, it's not too difficult for us. Where it really gets complicated and challenging is if you're a, consumer packaged goods product, company. And you have this huge supply chain with all kinds of different vendors supplying all kinds of different things. That's where it gets really complicated. And
although in theory you have people who are, you have more resources at that point as well, right? So it is
Absolutely.
more complicated, but you have actually people managing that complexity.
One would hope.
Well, yes, one would hope. But so glad we're on the same page about, just writing a check doesn't cut it very often. But if you are writing the check, who do you write it to?
Well,
if you have any advice there, right? If maybe you don't. Sure.
So on the kind of offsets and renewable energy credit side, there's a B Corp called 3 Degrees. So we use, there's a big movement within the B Corp community to support the B Corp community, because the best way for us to kind of prove our success is for everybody to be profitable and successful. And so we use 3 Degrees for all of that kind of stuff. And it's a, partnership with them. I think that's one thing, again, assessing internally, looking at everything that we're doing internally, that also, helps as well.
Okay.
Yeah, is that kind of, was that what you were looking for?
I'm just looking for what your experience is really for kind of giving people ideas of what to do. I had conversations with people where they had very specific, for example, charities in mind. And like, we donate to this reforestation thing. And it's not so much that one is, I don't know which one is the best one, just gathering kind of information.
Well, on the philanthropic side.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
On the philanthropic side, we're a 1% for the Planet member. And so 1% of our top line revenue goes to environmental charities, no matter what.
Okay.
So basically, a percentage of whatever we make at the end of the year goes to environmental charities, and we choose those each year. So that's, one philanthropic component. It is kind of writing a check on some level, but it's not like, it's not the only thing we do by any means. It is just one additional thing that we do, that helps us define who we are as a company.
Okay. So I had another kind of question about the whole, how do you become net zero, which is the measurement side of it, right? And personally, I have a love-hate relationship with metrics in general. Like, I'm a, kind of engineer, marketer by profession, and both of those things kind of demand some kind of fixation with numbers, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Especially today. But sometimes it feels like you miss the wood for the trees when you focus too much on the thing. So I had an interesting conversation with Peldi, the guy who runs Balsamic, one of the earlier interviews, where he was like, we don't measure anything, we just measure cash for company profitability, right? Like company metrics. And he was probably exaggerating a little bit. Like, I'm sure they measure things like churn and customer numbers and so on. But his point is that it's not what drives the company. And this thing about carbon neutrality, I hear a lot of people kind of, like, oh, we can't do anything and we start measuring stuff. We need to measure and understand everything, and then we can start offsetting or whatever. So what are you guys measuring, right? If you are measuring, and how, how important is it? Do you need accurate measurements? Can you just like, can you go with some kind of fuzzy logic on this and be like, hey, well, we're 10 people, so we probably need to pay this much?
Yes, to a point, for sure. There absolutely is math out there, and there are sustainability consultants who specifically focus on that can help you with, a formula really quickly for your business. In terms of us, we measure the energy use based on the square footage of our office space. We measure, like I said, we offset any travel, so we measure miles. I think you are correct in that we live in a world that's obsessed with numbers, and when in a world where you can measure everything, it's not necessarily smart to measure everything, because then you get into analysis paralysis, and I don't want to fall into that trap. And so my idea is that if we do some basic estimations and we understand that, our net zero line is here, then let's shoot for here. And so if we're going to offset this amount, let's make sure that it's above and beyond, what we think it's going to be. So let's do more than is asked of us, or more than we need to, in order to be sure that we're safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's heartening to hear that sort of approach. Sometimes it can be hard to kind of explain it to people who are very kind of focused on the numbers. There's nothing wrong with numbers. Don't get me wrong. But
No. But they can be, and a data scientist would never back me up on this, but they can, we're a digital marketing agency, and so we do a lot of metrics, and we for our clients, we focus on bounce rates and churn and all of the kind of things that you're just mentioning. And the reality is, if you look at, for instance, Google Analytics, you get thousands and thousands of metrics for your website, just on your website, and it can be completely overwhelming. And it also can, people can waste a lot of time focusing on things that don't necessarily matter. And so when it comes to climate change, you can apply the same kind of approach to say, all right, if we know that we're burning this much energy, and that typically equates to this many, this much greenhouse gas emissions, then, we should just offset that, and we should just make sure that we're addressing and dealing with that, and not
there's very little downside to paying a little bit more. In something like this, as long as it's not breaking your kind of finances, but in theory it shouldn't be.
If I were a large company and had a bunch of analysts, that could specifically paid for that, awesome, great. I could get it right down to the 0.000 decimals, but I don't, and it's not really needed too. As a small company, I don't feel like we have so much of a huge impact that we're just completely like, oh my God, you have to.
So is there an online tool or something that maybe you've used or know about that somebody could use, where you go like, hey, I have 10 people, I have this many square feet to travel this much a year, blah blah blah?
Yeah, there's carbon calculators all over the internet. In fact, if you Google carbon calculator, there's literally dozens of them out there. The one that we use is a spreadsheet which is created by a sustainability consultant that's a friend of mine, who helped us kind of through this process. And that was really useful for someone who doesn't come from that world. It was really. I'm neck deep in it now, but I didn't study, climate science or sustainability or anything like that. So, understanding, I have a really good understanding of emissions, but like how to calculate them is not a thing that I do every day.
It's very hard. So, it's very hard. Even I think even for people who are into it, it's still hard to really, match things up. But let me try and kind of move towards a conclusion. I have a couple of minutes left on the original time and on the baby timer.
No problem.
I've sort of asked people, where they can, to give kind of maybe some kind of advice for people in similar situations or industries and so on. And I was wondering if I could ask you to share your best maybe approach or kind of tips on how to pitch this stuff, right? So if you want to be, let's say there's some guy somewhere when some person wants to start a similar kind of business, right? Like we want to create websites that are very green, sustainable, blah blah blah. How do you find those clients? And if you find clients who don't care, how do you pitch this, right? How do you kind of, like, for example, you said 5-10 years ago, people didn't care that much. People care a bit more now, but are they going to pay you more to do that, for example, or do you need to?
Yeah, no, they won't. And we realized very early on that leading with the green angle was not the selling point that we needed. Everybody wants a fast website. Everybody wants an easy to use website. If that website also happens to be powered by renewable energy, they're pleasantly surprised, but it isn't the driver for them. they want to provide a good experience for their users. And so for us, it's really about, pitching the angle of efficiency and performance, and speed. And we have stats that, people leave a website that doesn't load in under 2 seconds. And, there's a lot of things that we share as part of that process, and then we just, include the fact that, and also, by the way, our hosting service is powered by renewable energy, and we just make sure that that's included. And oftentimes client will be like, oh, that's cool. I wasn't even expecting that, but usually what their focus is really on the kind of performance and efficiency, and is it serving the need of what their users want,
So at the end of the day, it's still about, is the site meeting the business goals? Like, yeah, absolutely. If it's powered by renewable energy, but it's not converting customers or leads or whatever, then you're kind of. But do you get some business benefit from it? Like, for example, do you get referrals, or do you get like particular maybe groups of people where are specifically looking for this stuff that you can advertise to, for example, or I don't know.
I think on the green website, I think it's still relatively esoteric for most people. And I think, the growth that's happening there is in the web design community. It's designers who are looking at focusing on, creating climate friendly web solutions. On the business side, I definitely have seen a shift in people's attitudes towards us being B Corp. And we're in the B2B space, and that people didn't understand what it was. They didn't care what it was 10 years ago. Now it's really a much bigger thing, and we have clients who hire us for that. We have employees who come and work for us for that, or search out a company. I would say the majority now of the resumes that get submitted to Mightybytes are from people who want to work for a mission-driven organization. That's specifically in their cover letter, and that's usually a regular thing. And that is a really helpful thing for us as a company, because that's one layer of onboarding that that if they understand that and they get that, then that's going to be a helpful thing. They're going to understand kind of what it's like to work at a company like that.
Are you getting high quality candidates applying with that kind of frame of mind?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I think, absolutely, for sure. I think the caliber of candidates has definitely gone up, and we use the B Corp jobs board called BWork, which is bwork.com, and so we use that as our kind of primary hiring platform.
Okay, so then the people looking at that job platform are obviously, very
interested in working at B Corp.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to wrap things up here. I'm very glad we finally managed to have this call.
Likewise. I'm glad we could finally schedule it.
Thank you for listening. Please visit fatalerer.blog to join our mailing list and help support our community and project. And if you like the music, please check out the Happy Quartet on Bandcamp. That's it for today.